Hello and welcome to episode 18 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I am with Justin Binkowski. And today we're going to discuss the final week of group stage of stage 4. And then we're also going to preview the first LAN event of the season, the first LAN event since March 2020. So it's been like 15 or 16 months now. The stage 4 major, $500,000 event. We're going to give our predictions, going to go through the bracket match by match, and just figure out who's going to end up taking the grand prize. We also have some roster mania news, kind of temporary roster mania with the New York subliners, and we're going to touch on the situation with Huke. This was like literally right after our last podcast. Some big news drop, and we're just going to discuss it and maybe some updates because of some banter or controversy. I don't know what it is on Twitter. So how you doing, Bink?
I'm doing all right and ready to get right into it.
Yep, so let's get right into the final week of group stage. We had 10 matches starting on Thursday. We had like what we considered two pretty easy matches on Thursday on paper because the Toronto Ultra versus Los Angeles Guerrillas, LAG had not won a match at this point in the stage, and Toronto has looked like a top 3 or top 4 team in the league at this point. And then the second match is OpTic Chicago versus Seattle Surge. At this point, Seattle, had they lost this match, they would have owned the record for the most consecutive losses in CDL history, and they also hadn't won a control in like 2 months or whatever. And OpTic has looked like a top 5 team. So we thought coming in that it was just going to be a really easy, very quick day. The first series, Toronto just steamrolled LAG, unfortunately, and we thought, okay, OpTic's up next. OpTic didn't pull their end of the bargain. They not only allowed Seattle to win control for the first time in 2 months, they lost the series in a Game 5 to the Seattle Surge, which gives, I believe this is the Surge's 4th or 5th win of the CDL season. Either way, it is the fewest amount of wins of any team. Let's start with this OpTic Seattle series. What did you think of this?
Yeah, so let me look real quick before we get into it. So that was their Seattle's 5th match win. They're 5-19 on the year now. Next closest is 7 from Gorillas, Paris, and London. So definitely, like you said, the lowest amount of wins
Mm-hmm.
in the league. But regardless, coming into this week on our last episode of the pod, I talked about that miracle situation at the end, right? Like
Yeah.
we were kind of writing off Seattle just at the end, saying there was like a 90+% chance of them not making winners bracket for the stage 4 major. And then it clicked, and I was like, there's a world of possibility where Seattle comes in and they beat OpTic, and then they played Paris in their second match. And if they beat Paris, they would have been 2-3. Or if they had won in this hypothetical situation against OpTic and Seattle, they would have been 2-3, and then it would have came down to tiebreakers for them to potentially get the 3rd spot in winners bracket. So it wasn't completely impossible. And after this series, it was definitely looking a little bit more possible than we gave them credit for. But this was completely unexpected, like you said. Just the fact they won a control was pretty impressive, let alone winning the whole series. And in the back of my head, I was kind of thinking, the last couple stages, OpTic has had that 1 week in each of the group phases where they're in a slump or they hit a rut, however you want to word it. And that's after I saw this happen, I was like, is this really what's going to happen with OpTic? They're going to have another 0-2 week going into the first LAN in 15+ months. But obviously we'll touch on it later. Not really exactly what happened. And it just turns out this was a one-off upset. But it was a big win for Seattle. They, like you said, they do not have sole possession of the losing streak. They're tied with whoever, was it Minnesota?
Yeah, Minnesota last year
Remember.
had a
Yeah.
10-match losing streak as well.
Yeah, so definitely not a record you want to have sole possession of, but they're still in first for now. So it was a big win. I don't know how much it really changes for Seattle. I guess it just brings up a couple more questions about OpTic at this point, at least in the week before we see them play their second match.
Yeah, just to give a little bit of context to this, like the control win is just I've literally been harping on this for at least a month, and the reason being when they came into this OpTic match, Seattle, they were 3-19 in control this season. They were a combined. They were 0-11 on checkmate and raid control. They won all of their the 3 control wins. They won them all on Garrison, and when they played OpTic, they didn't have Garrison. They played on checkmate, which just makes it even more incredible. But obviously they've changed the roster a few times now. Classic comes in, and I think this might have been like their 3rd or 4th match or whatever with him. So this was
fourth.
Yeah, so there was extra practice with him another week, and they were getting used to him. But I still thought, all right, like this is the last week of group play. Maybe they do it at the major where there's like a do or die mentality. If you lose this one match, you're out. So, I did not see it coming with OpTic because OpTic's been one of the better control teams in the league as well, which just makes it even more surprising. Congrats to Seattle. They actually did it. They proved me wrong. I've been really down on them for about a month or two now, but congrats to them, and they deserve it. Of course, it comes against OpTic. This is like the perfect opportunity for them to get the Seattle to get the record, and it just didn't happen. Maybe another team will go on a 10-match losing streak and then finally get to 11. Do you want to talk about this Toronto LAG series at all before we move on to the next day?
We can just touch on it real quick. I don't think there's much we have to talk about. I was just going to say real quick, even with this win, we touched on it being Seattle's 5th series win of the year, but they still are in last place in the standings, and they only have 60 CDL points, which is 90 behind Florida, who are in 8th place at 150 for that cutoff to qualify for champs. So, it's just tough to even say this is a big win. Like, obviously, you want to win all the matches you play, but, like, they're still in a huge hole, and only winning this one match in group play, I guess it's better than going 0-5, but I don't know how much you can take away from it. Regardless of that, to bring up the Toronto LAG series, it was kind of a stomp. Garrison Hardpoint 251-36, Express Search and Destroy 6-3, and Raid Control was 3-1 all to Toronto. If you got anything you want to say about your boys, speak now. Forever hold your peace.
No, I'm kind of done with them. They're annoying me. I'm tired of picking them and being wrong, and then having you gloat or me just feel bad in general about this team losing. One thing before we move on though, and talk about like Tuesday or whatever, just to give some context, like 90 points, like that is a lot, especially at this stage in the season. So to put it into context, if Seattle won the Stage 4 major, they would still be behind Florida. And that's assuming that Florida doesn't win anything. So, Florida loses first match and Seattle wins the entire major, they're still 15 points behind 8th place. Yep. And, there's a very good chance that Florida wins, 1 or 2 or 3 matches and Seattle goes out without anything. And, we can say the same thing for, Paris and London and even LAG, because LAG is 60 points back. That's a pretty big thing for a team that's won 7 total matches this season. So it looks like the top 8 is, we're getting closer and closer to the end of the season, and that top 8 seems to be, kind of widening in terms of the top 8 from the bottom 4, but we'll see at the Stage 4 major. So let's talk about these Friday matches. These were a little different from the first day. New York versus London, I think we both agreed that New York should, win this match convincingly because London hasn't looked great, and New York has, at this point, been like maybe the best team, or not the best team, like best team besides FaZe. So, we didn't have a lot of disagreement there. With the LA Thieves Minnesota match, we agreed that this was possibly the most interesting and most impactful match of the entire weekend because of the ramifications of the group stage. I believe they're in Group A.
Yep.
I believe Group
The
A.
Thieves were in Group A, yeah.
So at this point, Minnesota was 2-1 coming in, and the Thieves were 1-2 coming into this match. I think we should point out that the Thieves made a roster change right before this match. They bring back Huke, and they bring back Slasher, both players they previously benched earlier in the season at different points. So this is a completely new lineup with Kenny, TJ, Huke, and Slasher. So I mean, we didn't even get to pick it with this roster coming in. But if the Thieves won and obviously Minnesota lost, then they would both be 2-2, and then it would matter about these the last group stage matches. Minnesota ends up winning a game 5, a really good match and overall. Minnesota, I think this was the series that LA Thieves got. Did LA Thieves get stomped in like one of these maps, or was that against OpTic?
I think that was against OpTic. Looking at the scores, LA Thieves 2 wins in this series were 6-1 on Standoff Search and 250-59 on Moscow Hardpoint.
Yeah.
So if anything, the Thieves wins were 2 lopsided ones, and Minnesota's wins were all close. They won Garrison Hardpoint 250-190, Garrison Control 3-2, and then Miami Search was 6-5.
Yeah, so I was thinking of the OpTic series, which we'll get to at the very end of this recap. But Minnesota ends up winning. They go to 3-1. They almost I don't think it was 100% lock, but it was essentially that they had guaranteed a winner's bracket spot. And I mean, at this point, I think they could even get first place if FaZe and OpTic, they lost and everything. So what do you think of this match in particular?
Yeah, so like you said, I was really looking forward to this one before the drama with Huke happened and before Thieves made the roster change. I believe I might have said Minnesota 3-2. I know I said I was picking Minnesota to win this before we even had the Thieves roster change. And I probably, even if the Thieves announced the roster change before the pod, I probably would have stuck with Minnesota just because it was again a new iteration for the Thieves. We didn't even mention it that Slasher and who came back into the lineup to replace Venom and Draza, the two young up and coming players who the Thieves used this year. So the Thieves' current roster and the roster for this match was Slasher, Who, Kenny, and TJ. But yeah, I was looking forward to this one, and it delivered. Like I kind of already said, LA's 2 map wins were convincing. The other maps were close, so I guess that's a sign of good things, at least from this first match that we saw out of the new team. But again, this was an important match with group play implications for getting that 3rd spot in winner's bracket at the major. So props to Minnesota for getting the job done in what was essentially a must-win series.
Let's talk about this roster change before we move on, because this came out of left field for me. I was not expecting to see either Huke or Slasher in the Thieves starting lineup at any point for the rest of the season, especially since JCap was really outspoken about Venom staying in the lineup when they benched Huke during right before Stage 4. So what was your reaction when they announced this, and what do you think after watching this match? What do you think of the Thieves' new lineup?
I was surprised as well. In particular, I think I was more surprised that Slasher came back than Huke coming back, even though, like you said, there was that stuff that we heard regarding the situation with Huke and what Cap was saying about Venom, all that. I was more surprised, I think, to see Slasher coming back just because like he hasn't played. He's been playing basically only 8 since being benched, as far as I know. I don't think he played in any of the amateur tournaments.
Pretty
So,
sure not.
I think he performed well. I'm pretty sure he had like a nasty pop-off game in that game 4 hard point that we were just talking about. That was a stomp. That might have like helped his numbers a little bit. Yeah, I mean he had an overall KD of 1.43 in a series that the Thieves only won one respawn map, so might have been swayed by. I think he went like 21-8 or something. I could be wrong on the exact numbers, but he played really well in like that Moscow, so that might skew his numbers a little bit. But he still performed well considering it was his first series back in a while. And the bigger thing for me out of this whole situation is we've heard from Slasher in particular in the past about how adamant he's been about not liking competing online. And with this first LAN event in the CDL in over a year coming up, it feels like that was the mindset or the move, mindset behind the move for the Thieves that, this LAN is coming up. We're going to see what our vets can do back on LAN. And who knows, maybe if the Thieves don't perform well at the major, they make another change going into Stage 5 and Champs. I'm not really sure. But I think that's the mindset that we're going to LAN. Let's get the vets back in there and see if they can pull off some magic again.
Yeah, man, if they make another roster change, it's gonna like all hell is gonna break loose, especially if they bench Huke, who I mean, obviously we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it before we get to the major, but like just the news and everything from him, and then him coming back. It would just be really, really weird to see him get benched again, or Slasher, considering I thought it was a really bad move at the time to bench him before the Stage 2 major. So, I mean, I guess we'll see. But, man, if they end up making another roster change, I just know that there's going to be a significant portion of the community that's going to really hate it. And, I mean, it makes Twitter fun, but it doesn't really make anything else entertaining. So let's get to these next 3 matches. On Saturday, we had 2 of the worst teams in the league, LAG versus London. A pretty big group stage match, Atlanta versus Minnesota. Atlanta came in undefeated. Minnesota coming off of that win, they were 3-1. So a win here a win against FaZe could mean first place depending on how the rest of the stage shakes out. And then the final match, Dallas versus Florida. I mean, let's start with this final match because Dallas has been a really interesting team to watch the entire season. In the first 2 stages, they were, obviously one of the very best teams in the entire league when they had Huke in the lineup, and it was basically the World Championship team minus Clayster. Then they make that move, they hit their slump, and then they make another move. They bring in Vivid from LAG, and they started off slow, but they're starting to heat up. They win this match 3-2. Florida has looked much improved throughout the stage. What do you think of Dallas's win over Florida here?
Yeah, before we get into that, I just want to bring up real quick, just for the sake of having all the matches documented, that Friday match, the first one before the Minnesota LA Thieves showdown was New York London. New York won 3-0, like we said. But just real quick, it was checkmate hardpoint 250 to 119 for New York. Standoff search, they won 6-5. I think that was like a 5-3 or 5-4 comeback. I know they came from behind to win it. I just don't remember the exact score. And then raid control was 3-1. Just to bring up the numbers there for that. And then the first 2 matches on Saturday, we saw London take down your Los Angeles Guerrillas 3-1. I already lost my place. The only match that the Guerrillas won in that was Garrison Control. London won both hardpoints relatively convincingly, and then Miami Search 6-5. And then that Atlanta-Minnesota match was also Atlanta won 3-1. Again, the only match Minnesota won in this was Garrison Control 3-2. Both hard points were pretty close. Garrison hard point 250, 246. I remember that one came down to the wire. I think Simp got like a two-piece on P2 or something like that, and solidified the win for them. And then Atlanta won Raid Search 6-3, and Raid hardpoint 250 to 210. So just wanted to get those numbers in there before we talk about the Dallas Florida match. But this was another one, I think, at least on paper. I know we mentioned a couple matches in particular just because this was the last week of group play for Stage 4. On the last episode, I think we brought up a few matches in particular that were of note or we were excited to see. I know we were looking forward to LA Thieves, Minnesota, also New York versus Toronto. But I'm pretty sure this was another one we highlighted just because of the group implications behind it, because we saw Florida had beaten Toronto to start Stage 4 group play. And I think in last week they went 1-1, and then because they only played one match this week against Dallas. So I think they went 1-1 last week when they lost to New York. I could be wrong on that.
No, they lost to New York and they beat LAG.
Yep. Okay. So, this was a big match coming in, and I know I predicted Florida to win. I was, again thinking online Dallas hadn't looked, particularly amazing with Vivid yet, since this is still, the first time they're playing together, this first stage for that change or that iteration of the roster. And Florida, again, it seemed like they were performing better at the time, so I was basing my pick off that. In this series, Florida does win Express Search 6-0, which was pretty impressive. But other than that, Dallas wins both hard points, and they clutch up 6-2 on Miami Search Game 5 to, in my mind at least, steal this one away from Florida and lock in that, they didn't lock in the group stage yet, or the winner's bracket spot at the major yet, but it gave them the tiebreaker advantage over Florida to, help make a better case for them to get that last spot.
Yeah. This is, in terms of stats, like, Havoc obviously is the odd man out when it comes to this Florida roster, but you would expect that. Like, whatever player comes into this roster, unless it's like, Simp or Octane or some, like, ridiculous Slayer, you're expecting them to kind of, at least when it comes to KD or whatever, they're going to be like the lowest man. And it's just interesting.
There's only so many kills on the map.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we saw that with FaZe last year where you have like Celium and Simp and Abizi, and it's like, Major Maniac's not going to drop like a 1.4 every time now because he can only do so much. With this Florida roster, it's just like, I don't know if there is a solution to this team, like to making them a championship contender, because like we've said in this episode, they are in 8th place. That's mostly because of what they've done previous to Havoc coming into the roster. So it's not entirely on him in this iteration of the roster. They had slacked before that and they didn't perform as well as they should have. But I don't know at this point in the season, with the available players, like even players on the bench or players in challengers, I don't know if there is a player out there that can slot into this Florida roster and make them a championship contender and like boost them into the top 3, because the top 3 is so good, and Florida just looks like they're kind of almost in the same boat that maybe OpTic is at this point. Like they're 4th, 5th, maybe 6th in the league, and that there's not a whole lot you can do about it. What do you think about that?
I don't think that's tough unless they absolutely bomb out this major. No, I haven't looked at the exact bracket. Before I say, because they're obviously starting in losers bracket. Spoiler alert for anybody who wasn't paying attention, I guess. So they're playing in the losers bracket. They'll play the winner of Thieves versus Gorillas. So unless they lose that first round matchup, like I don't. Even if they lose that one, it's tough for me. But I don't see a world where they make another change because, like you
Yeah.
said, I don't know who they could bring up. I mean, Florida has been good at finding these sort of diamond in the rough players, or just giving a chance to these amateur players and them producing. I'm thinking of Frosty coming in, making his uh well, it wasn't his COD debut, but
On this
they
level,
gave
it
him
was a
a
really big
chance.
deal.
Yeah. Well, he played for E6
Hmm.
and Midnight, I think, before that in Black Ops 4. But regardless, basically like his sophomore season, so they gave him a chance. And then guys like Pharaoh, obviously, he wasn't in the league before. Florida gave him his chance. And then Awakening and then Neptune this year. So like that, they've had success picking up quote unquote amateur players and slotting them into the roster. I just don't know if that's like, again, I don't know if it's necessary because like we just kind of hit on, there's only so many kills on the map and there's always going to be an odd man out. So I don't think you can really blame Havoc. He's a good
No.
Surge player, and uh, so regardless, I don't really think there's a change there for Florida. But this is obviously um a big stepping stone for the team because like we're gonna talk about later, we're going back to LAN, and this is basically the first major CDL event that Awakening is played on LAN. It will be Neptune's first LAN for a major COD event. I think Awakening played in in that Black Ops 4 champs.
Yeah, he did.
So um however you want to classify that regardless, but
It's the first
it's a big
pro
event for this team.
LAN.
Just sure. It's a big event to see what they're capable of on LAN, and kind of it's both Awakening and Neptune's opportunity to put anybody potentially saying they're like onliners or whatever. It's their chance to shut that down.
Yeah. So, Awakening's last LAN was the Atlanta Open, the Challengers Atlanta Open. So this was
Okay.
February 2020. He played with uh, Geofrosty, Willett, and Kaiser, and then he also played at the launch weekend. He did champs in 2019. So it's like, I mean, we can consider like he was a pro or whatever. I hate the argument like when it gets brought up, but like champs 2019, he gets top 32. Like that team, he's not getting out of group stage most likely, so I don't really consider it. Like it's much different now. He's playing against the
Yeah.
best players in the world in a completely different environment. And Neptune, I mean, this is according to COD Gamepedia. Maybe they don't have every result, but according to COD Gamepedia, this is literally his first Call of Duty LAN. Obviously, he's not a COD player for life or anything, but it's just interesting that this team, I mean, like Havoc is an experienced player, but he is relatively young compared to like, Crim 6 and like the guys that have been there since COD 4 and been playing all the time.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's really interesting. Skies is obviously not super old either, but I'm interested to see what happens. I think Ogre 2 has done honestly an incredible job. Like since the beginning of the CDL, he hasn't had star players. It's not like he's been able to pick up a Huke or a Octane, a Simp. He's had guys that I wouldn't say they're cast-offs because people certainly probably wanted Frosty because he showed a lot of potential, especially in like search tournaments and everything. But he's gotten guys that you wouldn't think would like make a really great team, and I think he's done that. I think at least the back half of the season since they benched Slacked and they brought in Havoc, they've done a really, really good job. I just, in my personal opinion, I don't see this team competing for a championship in August or whatever. I think of this team like they get, if they get fourth, you're like, man, they had a really good season, and if they get sixth or seventh or eighth, you're like, yeah, it makes sense. Like I don't see first or second place for this team, and that's unfortunate because they have a lot of talent on this team.
Yep. I mean, who knows? Maybe Humongous Wake shows up on LAN, drops a 1.8, and Florida wins stage 4 major.
I mean, if he drops a 1.8, just call it a season and just give the entire trophy to him. Give him champs, give him the check, everything. So let's move on. Let's talk about these final 3 matches of group stage. So I was making sure that we covered those other 2 matches, but you did. So on Sunday,
Yeah, I just ran through them.
we have Paris and Seattle. I mean, not a barn burner of a match there on paper, but Paris ends up winning 3-1. New York and Toronto. This is a really big match because I think it decided who was the first seed in their group. New York came in. They were undefeated at this point in the stage. Toronto had just the single loss at this point. They lost to Florida earlier in the stage. So like whoever won this got first seed, and then whoever lost would get second. Toronto ends up sweeping New York. New York has looked incredible for like the last 2 months. To see them get dominated like this, it pretty shocking. What do you think of this?
So before, so we don't forget, just that Paris-Seattle match. Paris obviously wins at 3-1, but the big takeaway here is Seattle won the control again.
That's their
So
fifth.
Seattle is on a two control win streak heading into the major. Is that like the catalyst for Seattle to make a run? Who knows? But no, so Paris picks up a big win for them there to allow them to move to 2 and 3 in their group, so they don't have to play in that first match in the lower bracket.
Yeah.
So I guess they're guaranteed some points from the major, whether they win or lose a series. But regardless, yeah, this Toronto match was really big. Not only was it for first place, but it had implications for that Dallas and Florida for that third spot, because with Dallas's win over Florida, they were both 3-2. New York going into this was 4-0, and Toronto was 3-1. So if New York had beat Toronto, New York would have been in first at 5-0, and then there would have been a 3-way tie for the 3 teams at 3-2. And I think with the tiebreakers, it would have been Toronto in second, Florida in third, and Dallas in fourth. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure. I know Skies like tweeted at Clayster saying like something like you want like I can't even remember, you want like a smoothie or something like that before the match. It was funny. But yeah, Toronto just came out hot, and it wasn't like a stomp by any means, but they got the job done. It was checkmate hardpoint. It went down to time. Toronto won 225 to 205. I think they said on broadcast it was like the 6th time we've seen that this year. I could be wrong on that exact number, but I believe that's what they said. Then Express Search and Destroy was 6-4 Toronto, and Garrison Control was 3-1 for Toronto to solidify that 3-0 over New York and get first place in Group B. The bigger takeaway for me, just looking at Toronto's performance in this group overall, is they lose that opening match to Florida to kick off Group B or Stage 4 group play, and then they go 4-0. Not only do they go 4-0 in their next 4 group play matches, but they win all 4 3-0 and have a 12-0 map count after the loss to Florida. So they're on a 12 map win streak heading into this major.
Yeah. I mean, that's just... Toronto can turn it on at any time. We saw that in the Stage 2 Major, where they would lose the opening map and then just completely wipe out a team. And they've been really the only team this year to... I don't know if it would be fair to say that they dominated FaZe, but to convincingly beat FaZe, they're like one of the very few teams to do it, and they did it in a best-of-9 series in the Stage 2 Major finals. And I mean, to beat New York in hardpoint, New York is incredible in hardpoint. Like, to this point, they are 33, or heading in, I guess, to this match, they were 33-14. This is like by far their best game mode. It's how they win series. Like, they're very much like a...
That's not only with Hydra, right? That's like overall this year.
That's overall. I mean, they have a higher.
It's even better with. Yeah. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, so they have a
Sorry.
great hardpoint team, and I know they went down to time, so it's obviously showing how strong both teams are and how highly contested it is. But just to win that is incredible. Toronto is like one of those teams. Like everybody shit on them for making that change and bringing in Insight and benching Zenny, but turns out it was actually a really good change. Like no offense to methods,
It
but
worked.
the results have
No,
been
yeah.
inarguable. So I mean, it's just incredible how much they progressed. Maybe they can compete with FaZe in the stage 4 major. We haven't really seen. I don't know how much LAN experience like Insight has, but Bance has a lot of LAN experience. He's like one of the best European players of all time at this point. Like his stock just keeps rising. We have Kleenex. I think didn't he make his name on LAN with Singularity or
Oh,
whatever?
what? Insight was on that team with him.
Oh, okay. So, yeah. So, I mean, this is a really interesting roster. I'm
Yep.
not sure what to really expect of them on LAN, but I don't really buy into, like massive changes between online and LAN.
Yeah.
So, just an incredible result for Toronto. Do you have any other thoughts before we move on to the last match of the week?
Do you want to talk about ASIM here, or you want to wait?
Oh yeah, we could talk about it. So, Asim, who has been like really the glue guy for New York this season, he stepped into a really difficult role with Zuma retiring due to injury, and Asim stepping in and filling his spot. And New York has had a really successful season, and like he's Canadian, so there's always gonna be like kind of some puckering essentially when you have like a foreign player, and it hasn't been an issue to this point because everything has been online since March 2020. Like really anything, as long as they're in the states and like their internet's not an issue, everything has been able to go smoothly. Unfortunately, he's had some visa issues. We talked about this a few weeks ago whenever he tweeted about like how he was denied entry into the United States because I think he said like he forgot his visa or something like that.
Well,
So
that was just my interpretation of
yeah,
it. He
that's what.
said he got denied at customs, I think.
Yeah, so that was what I thought. I thought maybe like he lost it or something, or forgot it at home, whatever. But apparently the visa issues are a little more extensive than we initially thought, and it's turned into something where it's going to require him to sit out the first LAN of the season. We don't really know if there's like an actual timetable for when he will be able to come in and be a part of New York, but because he's not able to get to Dallas, where the first major is, or the first LAN is taking place this season. New York is bringing in Decimate, formerly, very briefly, formerly of the Seattle Surge. He also played on the Los Angeles Guerrillas last season for like the entire season, so he has a lot of CDL experience. What do you think about just like this whole situation and Decimate stepping in?
Yeah, so I think obviously I don't want to pin it on ASIM in any way, but maybe that could have played a very minor role in like the end result of this series with New York and Toronto, right? Like, it had to have at least been in the back of the mind in some capacity of these New York players that like
Yeah.
they likely weren't going to get to play with this roster uh, in the week following this match. So maybe that had some small effect on the outcome of the match. I don't really think it did, but I just wanted to bring it up as
Yeah.
a potential point that could have impacted it. But yeah, it's really unfortunate the way the bracket shakes out because New York loses this match and Toronto gets first place in the group is now if ASIM was able to go to the LAN and New York plays Minnesota in the first round of the winners bracket. If New York wins that match, we get a rematch of the last grand finals in the winners bracket semifinals with New York going up against FaZe. That would have been a really hype match to see on LAN. I think we'll get into our predictions later, but I think even with Decimate, New York has a good shot to take down the rocker and set up that match, but it kind of like takes away a little bit from the pizzazz or the potential storyline of that grand finals rematch just because Asim's unable to travel to the U.S. for this event. It's unfortunate. I think Decimy is a good replacement based on the circumstances. Obviously, as we were talking about before the show, I think Sensor would have been it would have been a good fit if Sensor actually got to come in, play for New York just for this major and show what he's capable of. And it would have made sense from a role standpoint too. Like Sensor's that selfless SMG, just like Asim. Decimy kind of isn't like he's more of a, like Asim's put up really good slaying numbers. Just before I say this, but I think of Decimate more as like a slaying SMG than whereas Asim, like he can put up those numbers and he's shown that this year he's capable of it, but Asim does more dirty work than Desi does, in my opinion. So it'll be interesting to see how this works out for them. Unfortunate circumstances. It kind of puts a hamper, or it kind of lowers my expectations, right, for New York at the major, just because they can't play with their actual lineup. But we'll have to see what goes down.
Yeah, it's obviously really disappointing because, especially since New York is one of the best teams in the league and like a legitimate contender to win the major and to make a I don't want to say like a roster change because this isn't like likely permanent, but having to swap out a player it's really unfortunate. And to kind of elaborate on what you were saying as far as like the mental aspect of this kind of is like being a distraction while they head into a very, very important match in Toronto. Asim tweeted this, so it's like almost 2 weeks ago, and he said, this year has been so hard on me, especially this week. I've gone through a million problems outside of game with my mom's accident. His mom got in a what seemed to be a pretty severe car accident. Like the car was completely totaled. What it seemed from like the picture he showed. Internet's going out, PC's being broken, 90% of my stuff getting shipped to America, getting denied at customs. So, I mean, it's crazy that he's had to deal with so much. I know that he's also had, I believe 2 deaths in the family earlier in the year, where he said that he went to a funeral right before he played a match. It's crazy. I hope that New York is offering him like mental health resources through their organization, because I know Clayster has been very outspoken about it this season, whereas like the mental strain that these players are under, especially just competing all the time. They compete essentially every week, at least 2 days usually a week, and that's just like the official matches. And obviously they practice so much, either formally or informally with tens and everything. And with the pandemic, that like Clayster said, like he's having like literally Groundhog Day, just over and over and over again. He's doing the same thing, and it's very stressful. So I hope that Asim, Clayster, all of the CDL players, all of the Challengers players, like take care of your mental health. Like it's actually really, really important. I've went through stuff like fuck the pandemic. It's like literally been like horrible for mental health, and just like talk to people. That's all I can really say is like, reach out to your friends, reach out to family, whoever you have. Like, if those people can't, take their time to, help you, they're not real friends. They're not people that you want in your life. So, I didn't really mean to get into that kind of stuff, but just make sure that you're taking care of your mental health. It's super, super important. Like
for sure.
Like, your physical health is important, but your mental health might be even more important in my opinion. So, so I hope that Asim gets that stuff figured out really quickly and he's able to get back into it and hopefully get if there's a stage 5 major, I would assume there is, get to Dallas for a stage 5 major, compete, and maybe even win an event. It would be really cool to see him go from no offers before the season to a substitute to winning an event. So best of luck to him. Hopefully that stuff gets figured out. And let's talk about this.
Before we move on real quick.
Oh, what you want to say?
Sorry.
No, you're good.
No, I was gonna echo that. I mean, maybe after the season one of us can get a chance to interview Eason because, like you said,
Yeah.
it's just a huge storyline this year, and you kind of just touched on it there, like going from potentially not even being in the league to most recently being in the grand finals, now being on one of the top teams in the league, and um, obviously it's now confirmed he's not going to be at the stage 4 major, but it is important to remember there is stage 5 and obviously champs after that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's been announced yet anything about stage 5, but I
don't think so.
believe the assumption is that group play is going to remain online, and then that stage 5 major would be back on LAN. We don't know where it is or if that's true. But just based on stage 4, you would assume they would do the same thing for stage 5.
Yeah.
So it's important to remember that this situation for ASIM, at least temporarily, he would be most likely be back in the New York lineup for stage 5 group play, assuming it's online, and then hopefully that gives him another month additionally to try to get the visa situation figured out for stage 5 major, and then obviously after that champs. So we don't have to. I don't really have much to say, but I just wanted to point that out. That hopefully this is just a one major thing for him, and we see him back in the lineup for the rest of the season.
Yeah, hopefully it gets fixed because if New York thinks that they're not going to have him for the stage 5 major, it might change how they approach stage 5 group play, just because they might want to stick with Decimate in practice and actual games, so they don't, they're not switching back and forth and causing more issues. But I hope, and I don't think that this should be a really, really big issue. It shouldn't last for like a month and a half or whatever, but we'll see. And let's talk about this last match. Really important because OpTic lost their first match and the Thieves won their the first match of this week. And we've been calling it HBR Classic. It's still pending approval. And both of these teams came in, I believe, with 2-2 records. Essentially, whoever won the match, they would be in the top 3. Whoever lost the match would be in the bottom 3, and that's a huge difference. It's a much bigger difference than just getting second or third in your group. That's going from either being in the winner's bracket and having the luxury of losing a match during the major to being in the loser's bracket and possibly even starting in the very first round of loser's bracket and having to go like whatever it is, like 7-8 wins in a row if you actually wanted to reach the grand finals. So honestly, when I came into and I was starting to watch this series, I was like, I actually think Thieves could pull this off because they did not look that bad, especially with how minimal practice they had with this roster. And OpTic, they just lost control to the Seattle Surge, and they lost. They were one of the very few teams to lose to Seattle. So I was actually kind of expecting a Thieves win. OpTic comes out, they win a hard point. Thieves, they come back and win that search, but then it's just like a complete stomp. What did you think of this coming in?
Yeah, so just real quick, I'm pretty sure. Well, I know they had the like tiebreaker scenarios and everything like that on broadcast before this match, and I'm pretty sure they said the only way that Thieves could have gotten a winner's bracket is if they 3-0'd OpTic in the series.
Yeah.
So that gave me like flashbacks to the EG situation in World War II champs. Obviously they weren't able to get that done, and then I believe like it didn't matter after that. For the Thieves, they were in loser bracket, but then depending on how many matches the Thieves won against OpTic, that could have affected where OpTic finished in the standings, but then it didn't end up really mattering because OpTic just wins it. They were 3-2, tied with Minnesota, but they beat Minnesota in their matchup, so they just had the head-to-head, and they get the second spot in the group. And other than that, this was like a classic. We're calling it the HBR Classic, but this was a classic series win for OpTic in the sense they win all 3 respawns and lose the search. That's happened. I wish I had a counter, but I don't think that exists. But it's happened countless times, it feels like, for OpTic throughout the years with their teams in various games that they, have a lot of 3-1 wins where they win the respawns and lose that one search. That's their only map loss. So I guess maybe a takeaway for the Thieves, although they lost to Minnesota, they did win a search in that series, so they're 2-1 in search. With this current iteration of the Thieves, I guess that's Thieves 4.0 at this point.
I don't know.
But regardless, I think, like I already mentioned for the Thieves, the play for them is to see how this group can perform on LAN, and that's what they're banking on, is just the team showing up when it matters most on LAN and putting together a loser bracket run. So OpTic ends up getting this win here. Not much out of the ordinary. I think even before the roster change happened with the Thieves, we were both expecting OpTic to win this one, and that's just how it turns out.
Yeah, so let's talk about this Huke stuff. So Huke actually had he had a really good first map, and then everybody on the Thieves just kind of fizzled out essentially. Like, he had a decent second map as well, but then had a really bad map 3 and map 4 in the series. And this is coming off of, so this was Wednesday last week, which would have been, I think, June 9th. He dropped a video, a YouTube video, which is very out of the norm for Huke. He's like super introverted, it seems, at least in the public eye. He's not a big tweeter. He's not a content creator. So when he drops a YouTube video and it's 35 minutes long, you know some stuff is about to go down. He had been teasing this for a week or two or whatever. So essentially he says that he admits to using Adderall when the Dallas Empire win the 2020 CDL championship, which I believe is the first time that any pro player has admitted to using a performance-enhancing drug at any point in their career. I can't think of any. I know there have been, it's an open secret that dozens and dozens of players use Adderall, which is enhances your focus. People that have ADHD, they use some of them use Adderall, so it's easier to focus on things. COD players, just like any other professional athlete, if an athlete thinks that they can have an advantage or even the playing field with other teams by using something like this, they will. And it's been known throughout the community that a lot of players use Adderall to help them in game. And Huke admitted to this. He said that he at one point did not use Adderall, when he was underaged and in AW, when the Temp and TJ and him and everything, they were he said he was not using it. And then I don't know when exactly he said he began using it again, but after the season he decided to stop because he felt weird. He said he didn't enjoy winning the world championship. He didn't have,
that was the big thing for me.
Yeah, he didn't have the same joy from that world championship, which is his first world championship, one of the biggest tournaments in Call of Duty history, the first CDL championship. He didn't have the same joy he did as winning his first LAN event. It didn't even come close. And he said that the Adderall, in his mind, was the reason for it. He wasn't playing for enjoyment. It was more just playing for anger. I have to do this, and I will, and I'm kind of pissed about it, and it's fueling him. And he didn't want to do that. He wanted to be happy. He wanted to enjoy what he was doing professionally. So he stopped doing Adderall. His quote was, "We won champs and I didn't feel good." So he says that he cut out Adderall coming into the season. He made healthy changes, like regarding his eating habits, like working out, mental health, which we just discussed a little bit ago, and he stopped using Adderall. Dallas has a very good start to the season. They get to the Stage 1 major finals. They lose to FaZe. In the Stage 2, I forget what their group stage record was, but they still appeared to be one of the best teams in the league. I believe they got top 4 at the Stage 2 major. And then Stage 3 comes around, and I believe they win the very first match of Stage 3 group play. And then later that night, they bench Huke and they replace him with Fellow. And this all starts, different stuff. Like he gets benched, and then he eventually gets traded to the LA Thieves, where he plays very briefly, and then they bench him, and everything happens. So it's just a very complicated story. It's like it obviously took him 35 minutes to explain what essentially happened for the entire season, and the Adderall thing was a very, very big issue. I guess like Aches kind of called into question, like, what will Activision do regarding this, because a world championship player has obviously openly admitted to using the drug when he was playing a tournament. And so I guess I just want to get what your take is on this entire situation.
Yeah, it's a really tricky situation. I'm still not even sure exactly how to feel about it, but I think just like obviously what I mean by that, the Adderall use in Call of Duty on the
Yeah.
Huke video. I was really happy to see Huke come out with a video. And we'll talk about it later, that there could be another, as always, there's another side to the story.
Yeah.
So we'll have to wait that. So we have all the facts, but regardless, I think it was important for Huke to come out. Like you said, this is, as far as we know, the first time that a pro has actually admitted to using it, like he himself coming out and saying it. I know we mentioned it in our article about Huke's video, that the Washington Post wrote about Adderall use in all esports, not just Call of Duty. They had a report on that last year, and they quoted Killa in it, and Killa said that nobody talks about it because everyone is on it, referring to Adderall. So, it's definitely not a new topic. It might be like, a fresh topic in the eyes of the community, but it's something, like you said, an open secret, that a lot of people in the community just know that these pros are using it. Like, we don't know who in particular is using it, but it just seems like it's a problem behind the scenes, and I don't know what the solution is. Like, I was going to talk to my dad about it, because my dad was a state trooper for 31 years, and obviously, Adderall's not like the craziest drug in the world or anything, but I was just going to get his take on like what he thought could be a potential solution or something, and it didn't end up happening. But regardless, I don't really know what the league can do. I think, like you said, Aches mentioned in his tweet that it's part of their contracts, and to some extent, unconfirmed, because I don't know for sure, but if it is a part of the players' agreement or the players' contracts and players are still using it, obviously that's not like working, right? So what could be a potential solution? I am not sure. I don't know where we go from here, but I think it's a problem that needs to be addressed in some capacity, and I'm not sure when or if that'll happen, but it's something that for the sake of the league and the future benefit of the league, it's something they have to address. And that was just the big thing for me, with Huke saying he used Adderall at Champs last year. And then he says he wasn't using it this year, and in Stage 1 this year, he was considered one of the best players in the game for Stage 1, where he's saying he wasn't on Adderall. So it's clearly, different games, different team, 4v4, 5v5, all that, throwing that out the window. He wins a world championship while admitting to using Adderall in that performance. But then in the following, just like the next competition we have for Pro Call of Duty, he says he's not using it, and he was one of the best players still, performing well. So I don't know what you can take away from that. For me, it seems like, maybe it doesn't have as much of an impact as some people think, or like some players can perform without it and can perform with it or without it, either way. Uh, I don't know, man. It's a really tricky situation. I wish I had answers or knew more to say what needs to be done about it, but it's just something we're going to have to keep an eye on for, as long as the CDL's around
Yeah,
until something's done.
we discussed it in our group chat. We were just kind of throwing around ideas. Like I at least was saying like maybe forcing players to have a prescription for Adderall to use it, but it doesn't really like, other than knowing who, like which players are using it, like, and this would have to also coincide with some kind of drug testing, because I mean if you're requiring a prescription but you're not drug testing, it obviously doesn't matter because players just won't get a prescription for it, um, but like even if you drug test, and even if you force players to show proof of prescription, it doesn't mean that these players aren't, using it for the competitive advantage and not really like using it for its intended use, like in everyday life. Because I'm sure there are players. I think Clayster's admitted to like he needed Adderall. I don't know if this is like not recent at all. I think it was like years ago when people were talking about it, but he said like he had ADHD or ADD. I really can't remember off the top of my head what he said, but I remember him saying like there are people that really do need it, and it wouldn't be fair to just completely ban it, like ban the use of something like this, because there are people that really struggle and this helps them. It's just that it's unfortunate that some people will take advantage of it. So yeah.
The difference here, just to bring real sports into it, for relevancy, is right now in baseball, the big thing is the pitchers using foreign substances to get a better grip on the baseball when they're pitching, or to like improve their spin rate of the ball to make the ball either go faster or move better.
Hmm.
Um, MLB is cracking down on that now, and just recently being reported on what they plan on doing for penalties and stuff. But that's completely different than Adderall in the sense that there is the medical use of Adderall, right? It's not like, the
Yeah.
thing for baseball pitchers right now is spider tack. And that's literally just a sticky substance you put on your fingers to try to improve your grip and doctor the baseball. As far as I know, that doesn't have any like medical uses compared to Adderall, where, like you said, if you have a prescription, or if you have ADD, ADHD, and you have a prescription and need Adderall, so it's a different situation from that, and that's why I didn't, bring up drug testing or anything like that, just because, like you mentioned, there's workarounds and stuff. So it's a real tricky situation, and I don't have the answers, like I already said.
The second part of this video, after he discusses like quitting Adderall and like feeling different and everything, the fallout from, well, essentially like in the last like a month or two of him being on the Empire, he said he started not to enjoy the game because of the team environment, and essentially he said he was like basically scapegoated for whatever issues the team had, that he wasn't playing the game the right way, that he wasn't playing the game that playing the way that the Empire wanted. And then he said that he was benched, and he said he got a call from Rambo, who's the Empire's head coach, and Hastro, who is basically the head of Envy and like the gaming division of Envy. He said, quote, "Not a single word from my teammates, not a single word about what I'm doing wrong, just benched," end quote. Which is interesting. I don't know why Krim decided to tweet about it today, but he essentially So this is his tweet. I was willing to take the flack from everyone if the other option was explaining our decision in detail and potentially ruining Kyler's chances of getting on another CDL team. But there comes a point where you need to stick up for yourself and for the sake of your team. Upon seeking advice from people I respect in the gaming community, public relations, and legal entities, I will be addressing the decisions we've made regarding our roster changes with Huke sometime next week after the major. I don't really know what to make of Krim's tweet. What do you make of it?
I just think, kind of like we hinted at earlier, and part of the reason why I wasn't, in particular, I wasn't talking about this other stuff that happened later in the Huke video, is just there's more than one side to every story, and we've gotten Huke's perspective in his video, and now it sounds like Krim is going to come out with his perspective of the situation. I think it's important to note Huke didn't name any players in his video. It seems like, obviously, though, with Krim addressing this, that Krim, I mean, as you would assume from the undisputed, or one of the undisputed most successful Call of Duty players, he likely played some role in the decision for Dallas to move on from Huke. So obviously Kyler didn't say any names in his video, but we'll hear Krim's side eventually. The big thing, Crone put out a tweet on CDL Intel of a screen grab from a Twitch chat. One of the things Huke said was that the players, there was a rumor being spread about his health and stuff like that, and he said that he claimed that his former teammates on the Empire, or teammates at that time, weren't checking in on him, and Krim put out or was saying in the screen grab in Twitch chat that contradicts something, where he was in one particular scenario where he claims, I literally almost crashed my porch going out of my way to call him mid-stop in go traffic to ask him what's going on. So we're gonna have to wait for Krim's video to see the other side here, and then what we can gather from it. But the big takeaway for me is we haven't heard the end of this, and this is gonna be something that plays out likely throughout the rest of the year.
Yeah, before we move on, I just want to add this. So this is part of, I guess, Huke's. I guess you would say it's an allegation of them not checking in on him, or the aftermath of him being moved to the Thieves. He said that a friend of his in the COD community told him that there was a rumor being spread among players and everything that he was on psychedelics and that he really needed help, which is what you were referencing, how nobody was checking in on him and everything. It's just a very weird situation. Man, I hadn't heard any of this, and to hear Huke lay it out in a really coherent way, to say this is what happened, this is what's happening, or currently, it was just very interesting. I'm looking forward to Crimsix's side of it, because I'm sure there are, I don't know to what degree he will contradict or disagree with Huke's assessment of it. I'm sure there will be differences, because, although Huke didn't name Crimsix in the video, there was something where he essentially said Illy and Shotzi, they were always really respectful of me or whatever, and then just stop that sentence, and then you're okay, anybody else, it's just very interesting to see if Krim has anything to say about that, with and also the rumors of accusing him of being on psychedelics or whatever. So we'll see. It's a very interesting and very, honestly, sad situation, just regarding the mental health aspects of it and the drug use, and kind of the infighting allegedly in the Empire's team, which led to Huke's departure. So if you have any other thoughts, if you don't, then we'll move on to the Stage 4 Major.
No, I think we've talked about it enough.
Yep.
We can talk about it more after, obviously, we get this other video from Krem. But for now, let's just get into the major. LAN is back, baby.
Yep, it is on Thursday, June 17th. So at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 12 p.m. Pacific, fake time, as we would like to call it. We will see the first LAN match since, I believe, March 12th, 2020. Unfortunately, we're not getting like a banger of like an OpTic versus Envy or a OpTic versus Empire or FaZe versus OpTic, but we get Seattle Surge versus London Royal Ravens. Unfortunately, no fans at this event, just the players and the staff and everything. Even the commentators are. I think Crone said that they're going to be casting from home. They won't be in the arena, which is a little disappointing, but hopefully it won't cause too many issues. So the first match of the major is Seattle versus London. I guess who do you got there?
It's actually tougher than you think. While I'm doing it, you want to switch overlays and pull up the bracket?
Yeah, give me a second.
So anybody watching the video form can see. But yeah, I think London is obviously the smarter choice here. But I see, it's tough. I'm gonna say Seattle 3-2. I think it could go either way. Neither team has really impressed, right? Both teams went 1-4 in stage 4 group play. It's just in Group B, London gets that 5th seed because they beat the Gorillas, who went 0-5. Whereas in Group A, Seattle was tied with the Thieves at 1-4, but the Thieves beat Seattle, so Seattle's in that 6th spot. So with both teams at 1-4, Seattle's win over OpTic is more impressive to me than London's win over the Gorillas. So I'll say Seattle 3-2 for this one.
Yeah, I'll say London. I can't believe in Seattle after what we've been subjected to for this entire season from them. And I don't think that there's a real clear advantage either way here. Just a gut feeling that London will come out on top. And then we have the Battle of Los Angeles. Thieves versus Gorillas. I don't know how many times that they've met in a major this season, but I know that the first time it was a pretty big upset for the Gorillas over the Thieves. That was in the winners bracket. Yeah. So they met a few times since. Obviously, the Gorillas have not had a good season. The Thieves, they didn't have a great stage with 2 different rosters. I guess I'll go first. I'll say the Thieves. I'm tired of picking the Gorillas. I'm hoping that me jumping off the bandwagon will allow that wagon to roll even quicker and start to pick up some steam, and then I can hop back on when they're actually good, kind of like I do with the Browns, in my past life. I start rooting for the Packers or whatever team is on, not named the Steelers or Ravens. So hopefully this turns them around. If not, I just stay off the bandwagon. I let it go and it crashes and burns. So I'm going with the Thieves on this one.
Yeah, I'm going with Thieves too. Not even for the sake of the pod will I jump on the Gorillas bandwagon at this point. That is your shtick right now. Been your shtick this year, and I'm not going to take that away from you even if you're going Thieves. So I'm picking Thieves here. I'll say 3-0 just because, like we briefly touched on in the 2 matches we saw from this latest Thieves roster. They won searches against OpTic and Minnesota. So even if we're in that world where we think, we've said before that the Gorillas have a strong search team on paper with past, history, and then the Bevels and Ricky coaching staff for S&D Minds, whatever. I don't think that's a clear path to victory for the Gorillas. Mm-hmm. So I'm just stick with the Thieves here.
Let's just stay in the losers bracket for now. So we both picked the Thieves to win that first round, and they will play the Florida Mutineers in round 2 of the losers bracket. Florida versus the Thieves. Who do you have?
I'm going to go Florida 3-1. It's tough because, again, we've kind of touched on it earlier in this episode where it seems like the Thieves' strategy is to have these veterans coming in for the return to LAN.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, Florida has a couple players who haven't necessarily played at a major LAN like this before. So,
Yeah.
I guess it's a battle in that sense, but I'm just going to go with Florida. They beat Toronto in group play. Thieves went 1-4, regardless of roster changes. They went 1-4 in this stage, 0-2 with this latest iteration of the roster. So, to me, I think Florida's the better team. It could be a closer match because it's on LAN, but I'm still going with Florida.
Yeah, I want to pick the Thieves because, I mean, they did have a really close series with Minnesota, and had there been more to play for in that, like in the back half of the OpTic series, I think they would have done a little bit better. And like I think that's also just that's an anomaly. They're not going to get smoked like that most of the time, because we've seen OpTic get smoked just as bad in other series, and we know that they're a better team than what they've shown in like the Atlanta series or whatever. I want to pick Thieves, but I just can't. I can't bring myself to do it. So I'll say Florida. I think that they're a good team. Like there's no doubt about that. And if Big Wake shows up and he's just as good on LAN as he is online, which I fully expect, then it's going to be really hard for the Thieves to win this kind of matchup. And then the other losers bracket matchup, you have the Seattle Surge moving on into the second round, so they would play the Paris Legion. So Seattle versus Paris, who do you pick in here?
We saw this match literally less than a week ago. Paris won 3-1. I'll pick Paris 3-1 again.
Yeah, I have London going into the second round to face Paris, so this all European, not really European matchup, I'll say Paris. I mean, I'm wearing the hat tonight. They won 2 matches in a stage. It hasn't happened for months, and that's exciting. This roster seems to be improving with Zap in the lineup. Maybe they just keep rolling. Paris is winning champs. They're going to pick up steam at the end of the season, just like last season. So I'll go with Paris in this one. And let's start up at the winners bracket now. So the two winners round 1 matchups are New York versus Minnesota, and then OpTic versus Dallas. So we get another E Clasico to start off the major. Let's start with this New York Minnesota matchup. I know you mentioned it earlier, but just to reiterate, you have New York beating Minnesota, correct?
Yeah, I'm going to go with New York here. I think it'll obviously be a closer series. There could be some issues because, again, like we've touched on multiple times this episode, Decimate's going to play for ASIM on New York. So not an ideal situation for New York. It makes this match a little tougher than it would be, in my opinion, if ASIM was actually playing. But I think New York should still be able to get this one. I'm going to say New York 3-2.
Yeah, I'll say New York. I fully agree with you. It'll be closer, most likely, than it would have been if New York had their regular lineup. But I don't if this was the Minnesota that we saw, I think it was in stage 3 when they put Standy in originally, and they were just they were one of the hottest teams in the league at that point. It'd be a little bit different. I don't see that happening. I think New York win this. And then the other winners bracket round 1 match, we have OpTic versus Empire. We've seen this matchup a few times before. I think the most memorable one was the 3-2 win Dallas had. This was when Huke was still in the lineup, so this is probably the stage 2 major, and it came down to round 11 on checkmate. search, which
Yeah, I
was
remember. I just don't remember what major it was.
yeah, I think it was stage. It would have had to have been stage 1 or 2, but I think it was stage 2, and Huke clutched up against Envoy. Probably one of the best matches of the season, in my opinion. But I think, man, Empire has looked good with Vivid lately, and I think there is some momentum really built there because after losing for a stage and a half, to see some kind of wins like they did in stage 4 group play, I think there is some confidence building there. But I gotta say OpTic. I can't see them losing this. Like, even however bad they play against FaZe, like almost all the time, I still think OpTic would beat Empire here.
Yeah, I think this one's a little bit closer
Yeah,
than it would have been if Florida had beaten Dallas, but because of that win, that could be a sign of improvement for Dallas, which makes this a little tougher. But I still am picking OpTic here. For me, it's the return to LAN. Guys like Scump and Formal, especially Scump, have been vocal about wanting to go back to LAN. And although there's not going to be any fans at this event, which would obviously be a huge boost to the
yeah,
Green Wall. The return to LAN, I think that team is going to be energized and excited and come out firing all cylinders. And it might be too much for a retooled Dallas to handle right off the bat. So I don't really know. I'm not particularly confident in either team. I think it could go either way. But I do think OpTic should win this one.
yeah. We might as well just stick to the winners bracket for this winner
Yep.
semis. So we both think that the subliners will beat the Minnesota Rocker, which would make it a Atlanta versus New York rematch. This has been like one of the most contested rivalries in the entire league because New York is one of the few teams to actually beat them, I think, multiple times. I know that Search has been Atlanta's strong suit, but if New York can take a Search, then like all bets are off essentially. This is also the stage 3 major grand finals, and we know that FaZe ended up winning that. With this new or this like temporary New York lineup, do you think they can pull off the upset and beat FaZe?
No.
Yeah,
I think obviously we saw FaZe beat New York in the grand finals of the major, which was a best of 9. Was it 5-2?
I
I
believe
think it
so.
was
Yeah.
5-2. I'm not really sure. But the last best of 5 we saw New York and Atlanta play was in that winners finals where New York won, but it came down to Game 5, Round 11, a 1v1 between Hydra and Simp, where Hydra or Clay telling Hydra basically called Simp's bluff of not planting the bomb, and Hydra
Mm-hmm.
didn't check, and New York won. So the last best of 5 we saw between FaZe and New York with ASIM was extremely close and came down to literally the absolute last second.
Yeah.
Which even though New York wins that one, I don't think they're going to be able to have the same result with last minute fill in with Desi. So I am obviously picking FaZe here.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I can't see a temporary lineup, even if there's just like one replacement. I can't see any team beating FaZe when they're making that kind of change because they don't have the practice, they don't have the chemistry. Even with ASIM, I would pick FaZe here, and they don't have ASIM, so it's a pretty easy decision. If they do pull off this upset, it's just incredible, and like it's a testament to like how good of a team New York is, and presumably how well Decimate can actually perform. But on paper, I can't really see New York with a fill-in beating FaZe. And then this other winners bracket round 2 matchup, it'll be the Ultra. I believe you picked the OpTic, right? So
Yes.
we both think that OpTic will play Toronto. I mean, Toronto's coming off a really, really big win against New York. I don't. I can't. I can't pick first because I'm still thinking about who I think should actually win this. Who do you think, OpTic or Toronto?
Toronto. I'm saying Toronto 3-1. Maybe OpTic is able to win that first hard point. But control has been a strong suit for Toronto in particular. So, as long as Toronto is able to win that search, even if OpTic wins map 1, I think Toronto would end up taking that second hard point to win 3-1. But even saying 3-1, Toronto, like we already mentioned, they're on a 12-map winning streak right now heading into this. And I'll know, although there might be some questions about Toronto playing on LAN, whatever, all that aside, Toronto's still a really good team. In my head, they're a better team than OpTic right now, so I'm going with Toronto.
Yeah, the only reason I think there is like the possibility of an OpTic win here is because of hardpoint. That if OpTic can pull off like a 1-4, I mean, they're not like awful in search, so it's not like out of the realm of possibility, and they're not awful in control, so it's not like they can be completely written off in any single game mode. And I just like I want to say OpTic, but I just can't. Like I think, like you said, like Toronto's just a really good team. They're really, really hot right now. Probably the hottest team besides FaZe at this point. And I mean, even FaZe doesn't have a 12-map win streak. I don't know. Like Toronto, like I can't pick against them. It's essentially the same thing that we've been going through the last few stages, where as long as they're not playing each other, it's really hard to pick against FaZe, and it's really hard to pick against Toronto. So in this case, I'll say Toronto, but if OpTic do win this series, it's because of their hard point. They have to pull off those wins in hard point to really make it a series, because I don't see a 2-3-5 coming in for OpTic anytime soon against Toronto. And then let's drop down to the losers bracket. I mean, this is the fourth major, so I should have this down, but I think so. New York, so Minnesota, because they lose in the winners bracket, they would drop down to the top portion of the losers bracket, correct? All right, so we both think that the Florida Mutineers will make it to losers bracket round 3. We both think that the Rocker will drop down. So Florida versus Minnesota, who do you have?
Oh, in Florida, it's tough. Again, like both teams went 3-2 in group play, but for me, Florida has that win over Toronto, and that's an impressive win. No matter how you look at it, what transpired after it, it's an impressive win, and Florida has the potential to be a really strong team. Talked about the storylines with Awakening Neptune playing on LAN. This is also, as far as I know, going to be Standy's first. I mean, it's definitely his first CDL LAN event, but it's like his first major LAN as far as I know. Yeah, I think it'll be a good one. I've got it Florida winning 3-2 in my bracket. And I guess that's one I could see going either way, but I'm going to go with Florida.
I agree with you. I think Florida pulls this out. They, on paper, like pretty evenly matched, because neither have proven to be super, super good. At times, like you said, Florida beating Toronto, that's really big, but also Florida, like, losing is, they're not, like, I don't think they're consistent enough to, put the stamp of approval of, like, a top 4 team. And with Rocker, I just don't think that they're as good, like, as Florida in general. So I would say Florida wins this. And then in the other losers bracket match, we have the Dallas Empire versus. So we both picked Paris in this. So yes. This is like one of the first times that we've ever agreed on a major. Maybe this is a sign of things to come. So Empire versus Paris. Who do you have?
It most likely means that we're going to be completely off. and
This is the
we'll
one
see a
where
Rocker
LAG.
versus Dallas winners final.
No, LAG just like they run, they get to like top 3 or something.
For me, for Dallas versus Paris, I'm gonna go with Dallas. Again, it's one of those toss-ups, just in the sense that it's new rosters for both teams. Although Dallas has that recent win over Florida, and it could have been, as I've kind of said a couple times, been a sign of improvement for them with Vivid on the squad. Paris only went 2-3, and their most recent win was against Seattle, which isn't like comparatively, Paris beating Seattle isn't as impressive to me as Dallas taking down Florida. So I think even with the recent change for Dallas, they're the better team than Paris, and I'll go with Dallas here.
Yeah, I agree. Paris was winning champs, but this isn't champs, so Dallas wins. I just don't think Paris is on Dallas's level, especially with how well Dallas has begun playing. And I think they could, if they didn't start against OpTic, if they had played Minnesota in round 1, I think that it'd be a little bit different. But I think Dallas pulls this off and they beat Paris. So in round 4 it switches. So we both think that New York is going to drop down. So they would play Dallas in the next match. Dallas versus New York. Who do you have?
I'm gonna go with New York. It's kind of controversial, obviously, with the ASIM situation, but I'm gonna say New York 3-2. I could obviously see Dallas winning this one just based off the fact of New York playing with a temporary stand-in. But I'm just gonna go with New York for the sake of this one.
I think Dallas wins this. I think that it had ASIM been there, I think that New York would have the advantage, but just not the case here. So I say Dallas moves on. So this would be a top 6 showing. So it'd be pretty impressive for Dallas, who have struggled since benching Huke. And then that other losers bracket matchup. So we both think that that OpTic is going to drop down. So they would play Florida. So Florida versus OpTic. Who do you have?
I'm gonna go OpTic 3-1. I think some of these matches are really tough for me.
Yeah.
And people make the coin toss or the coin flip joke or whatever, but I think this one has the potential to be a close one, but similar to that Thieves Florida matchup, which we think will happen. This potential OpTic Florida matchup is again a story of LAN experience versus LAN inexperience for specific players in the matchup. How much of a factor that plays is to be determined, or if you're like you and partially me, you think it won't play any role. But regardless, that OpTic's loss to Seattle aside, I still think OpTic. I don't even know if I want to say OpTic is a better team right now, but it's close. We talked about it in the last episode. I'm pretty sure if we did like a tiered power rankings. FaZe is kind of in the tier of their own. New York, Toronto, like below them, and then like that mid tier is kind of like OpTic, Dallas, Rocker, Florida, whatever you want to do. Maybe Dallas wasn't in there until recently, but they're kind of just both middle of the pack teams right now, so it could go either way. I will pick OpTic over Florida for this one though.
Yeah, I think OpTic is the better team. I think if there's a toss-up, you default to experience, and OpTic has that. So, but it should be close because I really can see Florida winning this, especially if if they've gotten to this point. That means that they've won 2 in a row, and they've beaten probably the Thieves and probably Minnesota. So those are, those are 2 teams to be proud of to beat. So. There's a very real chance that Florida wins this. I just think OpTic ends up winning it, which would make the losers bracket semifinals. It would be OpTic versus Dallas. So, right? Is that correct?
For you, I would have OpTic versus New York.
Okay, so you say yours versus OpTic versus New York?
I'm going to go OpTic 3-2.
Yeah.
I think if New York is able to overcome their unfortunate situation in the Dallas series, I don't think it will be enough for them to take down Chicago with a fill-in like that. So the journey ends there for New York in my bracket.
Yeah, I'll say OpTic. I
You have
just
OpTic versus Dallas though, a rematch.
yeah. I think OpTic. Like if I think that OpTic will beat Dallas in the first match,
Yep.
and OpTic is like getting back some maybe momentum or confidence after losing to Toronto if they beat Florida, and Florida's a good team, so I think that OpTic should beat Dallas, which would move them into the the losers bracket finals. So let's go
Yep.
back up to the winners bracket and decide who gets to the grand finals. So we both have Atlanta versus Toronto, which is a rematch of the Stage 2 major grand final, and they also have played in the Stage 3 major, if I'm not mistaken, at some point. So FaZe versus Toronto, who do you have?
No, phase 3-2. Similar. I mean, last event when Toronto was coming off winning the Stage 2 major and they went 5-0 in Stage 3 group play, right?
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure they did.
they
And
did.
they were like considered the favorite for the major by many people. I stuck with FaZe to win the Stage 3 major and said I wasn't picking against them, and I'm not doing it now, so going FaZe here.
Yeah, I'll go with FaZe. I learned my lesson from the last time, and I was all in on Toronto in the Stage 2 major, and or the Stage 3 major, I think. And yeah, it was definitely a Stage 3 major. I was all
Yeah.
in on them, and I thought that FaZe would get to the grand finals, but they just wouldn't be able to do it. I'm gonna say FaZe. I just think they're really, really
Yep.
like they're the best team in the world, and unless say Toronto is able to steal a search, which would be really, really crazy considering how well FaZe has been playing in the game mode. Yeah, it's not that I can't see it. It's just I don't think it will happen. So I'll say FaZe moves on to the grand finals, which would knock Toronto down into the losers bracket finals. And I believe you have OpTic versus Toronto, right?
Correct.
So we both have OpTic versus
Well, you would
Toronto
too.
in the losers finals. Who do you have there?
Toronto again, similar to what you just most recently said about your match between OpTic and Dallas. You had OpTic in that first round, beating Dallas, so you're not going to pick differently in the losers bracket. For me, I have Toronto beating OpTic in that second winners bracket match, so I'm not going to change it up in the losers bracket final, and I think Toronto will get back to the grand finals.
Yeah, the only thing that would prevent me from saying, like 100% with 100% confidence that Toronto will beat OpTic is that Toronto would likely have only played, I think, that first match, so they would lose to Atlanta, and then they would play OpTic, who is coming off of a win that day, I think. So I think I'm pretty sure that the loser semis is also on the final day, if I'm not mistaken. So like loser semis, winners finals, losers finals, grand finals. If that's the schedule that they're going with.
On Sunday is elimination round 5.
Yeah, so loser semis is on
Yeah,
Sunday.
losers semis, losers final, and then grand final.
Okay, so winners. So Toronto doesn't even play on the last day if they lose in winners finals, which could be interesting.
What do you mean?
You said that it's loser semis, losers finals, grand finals, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Toronto likely would not have. So like OpTic will have, say, a win, like right at so OpTic starts the day off with a win, and then they play Toronto, who's coming in cold. Which I mean, some people argue I think people stupidly argue like, oh, you'll get fatigued if you play 2 series. It's like, no, like every
Yeah.
team plays like so many series of scrims that they become accustomed to it. So I think OpTic would have the advantage. So that is something to keep an eye out for. Like whoever it is that ends up in that spot that they lose in the winners finals, and they come into Sunday and they're playing a team that's already won right before they play. I still think Toronto will win. I just think that they're the superior team to OpTic in general. But man, if there is a chance for OpTic, it's because they have that advantage. And even on LAN, like we don't really know how much of a factor it plays because we haven't seen this format on LAN. But I'll say Toronto just in case. And then in the winners finals, we both have the same pair of teams, Atlanta versus Toronto. There's no advantage other than Matt Vito for Atlanta in our scenario. So who do you have in this best of 9 series?
I'm gonna pick FaZe again, sticking with them, not having. I don't have a reason to pick against them. It is worth mentioning that Toronto is able to win the best of 9 in the stage 2 major against FaZe, though. So maybe the best of 9, the way the vetoes or just the map order plays out, maybe that's something that Toronto can take advantage of, or they that was in their advantage in the previous best of 9 they played against FaZe. I don't really know. I'm still gonna pick FaZe here, though.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's no reason to pick against FaZe. It's a little bit different if Toronto ends up beating FaZe in that winners bracket final, and then they meet again in the grand final. But we saw that happen in the New York FaZe series in stage 2 or stage 3, excuse me. So there's always a chance that whoever loses in that winners bracket final can get some revenge based off of like vetoes and knowing how the other team plays. But I'll say FaZe. I think they're just the best team in the game, and there's really no reason to pick them. It's getting kind of boring talking about them like that. So I hope that another team can really step up, or maybe 2 or 3 other teams can really step up and prove that they are considered the best team. But at this point, I just don't see it happening.
Yep.
I think that does it. We don't really have any. We should probably just talk about this real quick before we head out. I'll pull this up on the stream. This is just
that's all I was gonna say.
Just the standings for the CDL, the overall season standings. So the CDL points, like the match win percentage and the map win percentage, it really doesn't matter like those specific numbers because all about CDL points. Atlanta, as you guys can see if you're watching it, either live or on YouTube. 390 total CDL points. That's 110 more than second place, which is the New York Subliners. And then we have Toronto, Dallas, OpTic Chicago, and the LA Thieves in the top 6. And then the 7th is Minnesota Rocker. 8 is Florida. So Florida at 150 points would right now be the cutoff for the champs seeding or whatever, because the top 8 teams are only going to champs this season. So the bottom 4, LA Gorillas, London Royal Ravens, Paris Legion, and Seattle Surge, at this point in time, would, if the season ended today, they would not be attending the CDL Championship in 2021. Do you have anything to say about these standings before we head out?
Nothing in particular. I just wanted to bring them up so we had it for on here to show what's going on heading into the LAN. We've kind of already touched on that, like huge the gap widening there between that cutoff point for champs. So those bottom 4 teams, we've been saying it for a couple weeks now, but it's getting more true every time we say it. They are definitely running out of time. If they want to change things up and get into the contention for a champ spot, they're gonna have to go on a run at this major and try to get more points here. So the only other thing that really jumps out to me is how close the 2nd through 5th is. Right, New York's at 280. Ultra at 265, Dallas at 260, so only 5 points behind Toronto, and then OpTic at 230. So the second through fifth place is within 50 points. So we could see a shakeup there in the standings depending on how these teams perform. But other than that, nothing jumps out to me in particular.
I'm sure they'll mention it on the broadcast this weekend, but there's also the chance that FaZe can essentially lock up the first seed in the entire league because they are 110 points ahead of second place. And even if Toronto ends up as long as FaZe isn't just completely bomb out, because they have they're gonna get a minimum amount of points because of where they're starting in the major. So
Yep.
whatever it is, 20 or 30 points. So they'll at least get that. But say they win the major, they'll be at 465. And even if Toronto or New York get there, it's just I don't know. Is it gonna be enough? Are you gonna be able to make up that many points in the last stage?
You got to think in stage 5 after this major is done. Even if a team goes 5-0 in group play and wins that major, that's 125 points.
Mm-hmm.
So if FaZe is ahead of any team by over 125, they have first place locked up.
Yeah.
So I guess that's where it's, keeping an eye on.
Yeah. So just some storylines to watch. It'll be interesting. We finally are going back to LAN. This is 15 months or whatever in the making. Hopefully everything goes well, no technical difficulties, and
wow.
Yeah, I mean, can never really guarantee it. It's just a hope and a prayer. But I guess we'll see. Do you have any last thoughts before we sign off, and I close out the show?
You stole my thunder there. That's what I was going to say. I wanted to say I'm obviously really excited for the return to LAN and happy we're finally going back, but I want to temper fans' expectations here. We are excited that we're going back to LAN, but this is the first LAN in over a year, and I wouldn't be surprised if there were technical difficulties, and there might be some fans out there who would get enraged or, especially angered by technical difficulties or long delays, but it's something that might happen. So I wanted to, you beat me to it, but I just wanted to bring that up, that it's something we could see this week. And in all honesty, it's something we will likely see. Mm-hmm. I would be very surprised if there's not at least a small hiccup just because of the transition back to LAN and due to how long it's been since, we last had a major LAN tournament.
Yep. Subscribe on whatever platform you're listening or watching on. If you're on YouTube, make sure to subscribe, like the videos, share the videos. Also, we're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, all the other podcasting platforms. Make sure to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. Make sure to follow us on Twitter. Bink is at JBink with 2 Ks. I'm at Presbyers. And the Ego Chall Podcast Twitter is at Ego Chall Podcast. Our next show will be Tuesday, June 22nd. We will wrap up the Stage 4 Major. We'll hopefully be talking about how there were no technical difficulties and it was a very smooth event to watch. But yeah, we'll be back next Tuesday, June 22nd. That's all I have, and Bink, take it away.
Yep, I'm good. Just, said it enough. LAN is back, baby. Can't wait to watch some local area network Call of Duty this week, and I hope you guys are excited too. So thanks for tuning in, and always remember to send the chow.